Talk Radio 1210 WPHT special presentation.
It's the end of the world.
Hey, Nero, let's put a trigger warning on trigger warnings.
One day I have a dishwasher dry.
I gotta take it on the other side.
That's right. You're here for another Other Side with Dan and DiRenzo. Anthony, we got so much today, man. Philadelphia crime causing some drama at the Inquirer. There's a new Jussie Smollett out there, and Barbie already getting some reviews from conservatives that aren't too happy, and some liberals who are loving the new film. Anthony, how you doing today, sir?
I'm great. How are you, my man?
I'm doing pretty good. I've had a long, tumultuous day, to say the least. I actually just walked outside here a couple minutes ago, and a very famous local reporter was on our street interviewing a neighbor because her husband, a guy who I think he had some kind of horrible sickness. He walks with a cane now. Every evening he'd walk his dog, Anthony, and I guess he was hit by a car and killed in a hit and run. And allegedly, police didn't respond or didn't pick up the call or something for 30 minutes. The driver ended up driving away. It's a whole thing. So I opened up the door here, walked outside, and there she was. A very famous local reporter had a conversation with her about this. But it just plays into the whole theme. I mean, right outside on my street, Anthony, I'm sure you're seeing it too. You're near the art museum. Crime continues to be an issue here in Philadelphia.
Yeah, and that's exactly, I mean, to your point, a lot of the backlash coming from outlets like social media and accounts like Philly Crime Update that we've seen, they're now being slandered by the Inquirer and saying, oh, this isn't what police reports say, when in reality, they have audio from the police radio system claiming, I mean, it's not claiming, you hear them, they are being surrounded by dirt bikes, ATVs, getting swarmed and things thrown at the cars. So it's, I mean, these things clearly are a serious issue. And no matter, whether you're a bystander there, a police officer, you never know where these situations can lead. And this is exactly why all of the police officers are looking forward to something new in November, because at least it gives them hopefully one person that will back them, because right now it seems like nobody will when it comes to leadership.
No one. I mean, Dom was saying on today's Dom Giordano's show, Sherelle Parker, the first sign to see if she's going to actually follow through on her word is whether or not she keeps Danielle Outlaw, because Outlaw's become clearly an issue. I mean, it's not only, I love harping on Krasner, don't get me wrong. If I can have an opportunity to, say something negative about him, I will. But the police department itself, man, it's like these response times that we're seeing, the understaffing, that's all points to just horrible, horrible leadership by someone who probably shouldn't be in the position that they're in.
It just comes down to who is going to stand up. And I know we like John McInnesby, who's come on with Dom and multiple hosts here. We see all of the officers pretty much look for the drop program because they don't know what else to do. I mean, I talked to a caller today who moved to West PA, and he's looking for a job, and he is not trying to be a police officer. And he never lived in West PA. He was telling me how he can't even find a pizza out there, and I'm like, yeah, I know, man, it's rough. When I went to school out there, so it's, it really is upsetting, and a lot of these people do want to see change, and we are seeing positive change. In some ways, I know I was recently reading Amon Brown, who we've also had on with Dom and at 1210 multiple times. He continues to fight in Harrisburg because he is a representative for all of this violent crime. And as much as obviously Krasner or Kenny kind of could care less, at least he has some power in Harrisburg to try to move the needle on this. So we're lucky we have some people, but as you said, it's until this leadership significantly changes, I don't think the morale will change or, the trends will change either.
Yeah, and I think another thing that could really help to change and make Philadelphia safer was if we had, we here at 1210, we try to do the best we can, reporting honest truths, bringing you what's happening on the streets of Philadelphia. But the Philadelphia Inquirer, man, their newsroom doesn't even have a, quote, crime reporter anymore. They report on, social justice and issues of justice. It's not, the standard My dad being an old school editor, science a reporter assigned to a beat that would go, report on the streets. It's not what they're doing anymore. And because of that, I think those in power don't feel the fire under their asses. So you have places like Philly Crime Update or Sergeant Mar popping up that are just getting the message out there. And it turns out the legacy media, like the Inquirer, who doesn't have crime reporters, when they don't have these type of crime reporters, drama happens and they get caught with their pants down. Anthony, tell us what happened with Philly Crime Update.
Yeah, so essentially, Philly Crime Update has been updating all of these things. It kind of like, I mean, in a similar way to the Citizen app. If you're in the city, there's an app called the Citizen app, and you could download it. And no matter where you're at, whether you're home, away, near a crime, far from it, you could get notified for whatever's kind of going on at that given time. To your point, whether a woman gets assaulted at a 7-Eleven. Today, I saw in there someone's running around with a wooden stick near the library, hitting people, just random, anything from a carjacking to something random like that. And Philly Crime Update continually was posting these things. And specifically, the Inquirer came out and was saying a viral social media account, which they didn't even name him. And they're so worried about people, trolls online then that are kind of defending Krasner and the Inquirer are saying, oh, who are you? What's your identity? When that's not even part of it. It's just Philly Crime Update's just there for people to look at. I mean, even we've talked to the guys at Temple with Keep Us Safe TU. And if you're going to say that they're extreme, I mean, come on. They're college kids that don't want to be carjacked or have their home invaded.
Right. Yeah.
It's absolutely, and they posted it. And even that screenshot, a lot of the, people supporting whether it's Krasner or the Inquirer, they were posting screenshots of the Temple page as well, which I'm not saying one is worse than the other, but I think the Temple page, it really is. It shows how kids can't even look for accounts to be safe when something like TU Alerts, which is supposed to alert them, and all these things happening, which it doesn't tell them because they don't want it. They don't want the bad PR with a Temple, a school who now raised their tuition as well amid all this craziness. So it's just, we can't even have grassroots accounts without going after them and saying that these viral fear-mongering social media accounts and get fear-mongering. Like, did you guys read what you wrote during the pandemic? It's just
right.
So relative. Like there's never any self-reflection. Yeah. It's always just pointing the finger, and we all need to be aware of that instead of falling for it and playing this stupid game that we are.
I think the Inquirer needs to take a moment and step back and evaluate their position too, because in calling this, extreme blogger out for this report, what they're essentially doing is, in the same breath, defending criminals and justifying these ATVs and dirt bikes on the road. So the fact that there's an editor sitting there, a reporter that sees this and thinks that there's a story that needs to be reported because maybe the ATVs and motorbikes aren't as bad as they're saying out there, like that is so counterintuitive to the safety of Philadelphian citizens. Because if you live in Philadelphia, which I'm sure many Inquirer reporters don't, but if you live here, you recognize a very urgent issue with these dirt bikes, ATVs going right here in Port Richmond, going down Aramingo. It's the dirt bikes, ATVs, packs of 25 running through red lights, almost causing accidents. I was almost hit by a guy doing a wheelie the other day. He was coming at me. I was driving on the right side of the road. He was driving on the left side of the road on his dirt bike doing a wheelie. And I guess he was showing off to his friends how close he could get to a citizen's vehicle and almost sideswiped my car. So it's like, as a citizen, what the hell do I do then? I can't. It's a hit and run. Do I claim insurance? It's a horrible, lawless society that the Inquirer is enabling by their refusal to report the truth because I think, Anthony, what's your justification for it? Why do you think the Inquirer does this? But I really think that they went so full bore in this criminal justice reform and backing Larry Krasner and saying that they have an issue here that they can't now look in the mirror and say, hey, you know what? Maybe I was wrong. And my way of reform is wrong for society. And I should start telling the truth and reevaluating my position. But no, they can't be honest with themselves because I don't know. What's your justification for it?
Yeah, I think to your point, they don't want to upset. I mean, honestly, maybe it's just the editor. I don't know who it is. Obviously, whoever runs that newsroom doesn't like accurate crime reporting for whatever reason, whether they have an agenda against the police, the commissioner. I don't know. I mean, obviously, they're fans of Krasner. Helen Gim, I think, was the first person they wrote a write-up for when it came to mayor candidates. So it's
surprising.
And that's not, I mean, journalism has a lot of young progressive reporters, so it's not necessarily surprising. But at the same time, when you're the major paper in a city like Philadelphia, I just am still surprised that they're not trying to be a little bit more middle of the road.
They're cowards. I called them cowards before. I called Will Bunch directly a coward, and he actually came on air and we went at it over this. Because they're absolute cowards, because they're fearful that if they report the truth, maybe it's nuts. Maybe Larry Krasner won't get them interviews, or there's some kind of over.
No, they want access. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a newsroom technically at our station, but when you do, people are always worried about that. And in my opinion, especially when you're in our situation, whether you're a journalist, commentator, opinionated, pundit, whatever you want to say, I think having that access can be helpful. But when they don't give you access, that is the most telling thing, and we should all be critical of that. It's just like when a politician doesn't want to debate. There's a reason they don't want to debate. They don't, there's a reason Larry Krasner or Mayor Kenny, they don't call into us because they know we'd be able to clip it and make them look terrible. It's all, I mean, dude, that's politics.
And they're so fearful, and I think they're scared of the extreme left or something, because they refuse to write truthfully on crime, because I think they're being feared of being called racist or something, maybe. And the only time, I remember the first time that I thought, oh my gosh, the Inquirer is being critical of Krasner. They had to post it as an op-ed through the words of Michael Nutter. Like they couldn't even post it themselves. They couldn't be critical of Krasner themselves. They had to do it through an ex-mayor. It's just they're so cowardly, and it pisses me off because, again, investigative journalism, no matter who's running it, it should be critiques. It shouldn't be finding ways to justify their actions. And that's exactly what the Inquirer was doing here. Is they're trying to find a way to justify essentially the lawless society that Krasner has created, to say, hey, look, it's not as bad as Republicans are making it out to be, when indeed it really is.
When did journalism switch from holding accountability for the people and now it's just a defense for the power structure? I mean, we've come full circle in that. And that's why it's harder and harder and harder to even find any sort of credible local, especially political news, because it's all, it's not oversaturated. If anything, it's undersaturated, and all that saturation is fluff that isn't of value to any of us.
There's a story. I'll take everyone behind the scenes real quick. Within this past week, that we were going to interview the same person that the Inquirer was going to interview. And the Inquirer asked that they had first, and they got to the person first. So, we respect that. The person asked if we could reschedule. We said, definitely, we'd love to reschedule. Because for the greater good, we wanted this person's story to get out there, because the message is reinforcing the narrative that Krasner releases criminals back out on the street when they shouldn't be out there. So we get the message from this person, hey, let's reschedule. The Inquirer wants to interview us. The Inquirer and this person have the interview. We don't have ours for other reasons. We decide, maybe it's more beneficial for their family if they can get through to Krasner through an Inquirer article, because we all know Krasner reads the Inquirer like it's the Bible. So the Inquirer interviews this person. And then there's another aspect of the story that they don't necessarily need, but it makes it much juicier, that backs out for the safety and of her family, of the second family. So then it's now been 3 days, and there's been nothing on the Inquirer. I fear that I'm losing hope that they're even going to do a story about this now. And it's like, I can only imagine how many times there have been victims out there who just might have been approached by an Inquirer reporter, but maybe their story just wasn't juicy enough, or it wasn't a way that they can spin it to somehow favor Krasner in one way or another. So the editor or those in charge just decide to punt it. And I don't want to make assumptions, but my big feeling here is that might be what's happening again. So Inquirer, until you start actually reporting what's going on, what's happening in these families, and telling the truth about Krasner, we're going to have the 18% turnout of Krasner radicals come out when nobody else is aware that they need to come out to vote and vote this guy out of office.
I mean, I'll say this. I've met people, whether it's in the city and even outside of the city, people from here who voted for him. And I will say, at the very least, half of them are pretty much convinced that he just sold them a bag of goods. That's just a complete lie. And the other half, I think they're trying to convince themselves that he's not as bad as he actually is. So that
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt. I think those people you're talking to are just effing wrong, and they refuse to admit it, because Krasner is doing exactly what he said in the campaign. No bond. He said straight up he's going to reduce prosecutions on prostitution. He said all this from day one. He's standing by his word. Progressives just realize now that their word was freaking idiotic.
Well, I don't necessarily think it's like that detailed. I think they just sell them this utopia. And people get manipulated. And I try to not fault people for that, because even if I get frustrated with how someone thinks about politics, the fact that they care and the fact that they're engaged, I think is really important. I mean, people would hate my political views.
It's important to actually be informed, though, because what happens now is people get political, and they get politically driven based on emotions, based on something they read on TikTok, social media. And that becomes their whole political being. Then they refuse to accept any other ideology, and they go headstrong. And unless you're an informed voter, I honestly don't think your opinion should matter.
And I agree. It is obviously frustrating when people get so extreme and emotional, and both sides that is happening, especially since COVID. But I think in the end, when people do care, if they stick around long enough, which now in this polarized political time, I think people are sticking around. I think push comes to shove eventually. And I think a lot of people that never voted for, a guy like RFK, or maybe never even voted for a guy like Trump, or like, there are people I think that are just so sick of both sides that they'll look for any other option. And I do think more people being engaged, even if they are not informed enough, I think it helps us hopefully get to a better place, because like you said about the progressives, I think all of their cards are kind of being exposed, and the talking about how we need big government. Big government's been here, and it's not very compassionate to the middle class or the minority community. So I think this is sooner rather than later going to fall apart.
I want you to delve into that. Then you say RFK, you say let's get into presidential politics. Your update on the forecasting of how do you think moderates are going, man? Do you think actually RFK is going to make any way? Because I would like to guess that still 75% of the country falls, no, maybe not that much. 65% of the country falls into the moderate lane, whereas 35% are both on the left and right extremes. So you still have a big chunk of voters out there who really are don't know which way to go. And RFK emerges, you now have the Green Party emerging. Do you think any of those guys can make any waves besides just being a spoiler candidate?
It's hard to say, obviously, that RFK is going to be the president, because it seems so unlikely at this moment. I mean, even a guy like DeSantis, that also seems so unlikely at this moment. But I do think this election really could be a wild card. And it reminds me of 2016 a lot, where everyone said Trump had no chance. And I think ever since COVID, people are just really fed up of whether it's the spoon-fed stuff from the right or the left, ever since COVID, trying to keep people happy. And if they don't adjust, I just think RFK is already making noise. And even a guy after Tucker's debate with the Blaze, Vivek, continues to impress. And I think obviously after going on with Tucker, people are more and more interested with him. And I think he clearly looked like the best one. Mike Pence is just a moron. All of them were easily clipped there and shown how they're kind of frauds. I thought Tim Scott and Nikki Haley are decent. I think both of them are decent VP options for whoever ends up being. I mean, it's going to be Trump probably, but either way, RFK, I don't think the Democratic structure is going to necessarily let him win. It always seemed like Bernie had this stuff locked up previously, and they always never let him get it. And I don't know if that comes down to the way that they count votes. I don't know what they do when they come to their primaries, but even someone like Bernie seemed like a threat to them. So if RFK has this much momentum, I'm just scared that no matter what, he's just facing this roadblock if he continues to try to be a Democrat. Like, I almost want him to just go third party, because I think there are a lot of people that are willing to jump off the two-party system, especially right now with how everything's.
I've really kind of reevaluated my stance on RFK because if the guy had a chance, I gotta say, I really like a lot of his politics, what he's bringing to the table.
Yes.
But we talk often on our 1210 how he's essentially just a spoiler candidate for the Democrats. Maybe he can get into the debates, press Biden on some issues, siphon some votes away from Biden into him. I don't think people are giving enough credence to much of what made Trump the candidate that he was him grasping the anti-establishment. And he did it like no one before because he was relentless. And RFK, if he employs an anti-establishment relentless nature, which might be the path he goes down, I don't know if he's going to be much of a spoiler candidate to the Democrats. He might be a spoiler candidate to Trump, as those who are anti-establishment start siphoning off of Trump because they don't like certain things he do and goes over to RFK. So, I mean, we should also, if we're leaning conservative as individuals, really question RFK and not cheer him on if we want success of Republicans, because I fear he's not just going to siphon off a percentage of Biden votes. I think he might siphon off a higher percentage of Trump votes.
I 1000% agree with you. And this is, I think a lot of people who were Bernie voters are now almost Trump voters because they're so anti-establishment. They don't necessarily care about who the candidate is. They just want someone who will fight for the middle class and, people who are lower on the totem pole. And I know even, Trump's been a rich guy his whole life. Bernie's been someone who's taken advantage of the system. So they're both not perfect. But I think at the end of the day, to your point, the anti-establishment it's at a record high. And no matter what, I think that caring about the middle class and showing that, and the way that RFK has been able to show that so far, it's astounding. And that is the thing that brings progressive voters and I guess Trump supporters kind of together. And you're right, that can be a total different dynamic in this election. But
and what I want to say, 80-90%, I would say at this point, of anti-establishment, even Bernie bros, have become Trump supporters. So he has that base still. But again, if RFK, I would be concerned. I would be concerned that RFK is going to start siphoning those people off.
I think the only thing Republicans would then have to pivot on, at least in a sense of looking at voting trends, the abortion stuff last November was clearly a disadvantage for the Republicans.
Damaging.
If they don't adjust on that, I really think this new young block of voters that has been very emotional, to your point earlier when we were breaking that down, that could be a huge detriment to them. So that, I think that's another thing to think about when going on who's going to win in 24. There's a lot of voting blocks that aren't necessarily represented in polling or that we even necessarily know about. There's a lot of new voters, a lot of people who changed parties during COVID, a lot of people who are independent now. I just really think, especially when it comes to our national election, it's going to be, it will not be as predictable as everyone wants to make it seem.
Yeah. And you're talking about issues that I think Republicans might need to switch up on. This week, Joe Biden pretty much forced through some student loan forgiveness with an executive order. If you have 25 plus years of payments proof, then you can be forgiven up to a salary of a certain amount. But the point being, when that came out, again, the rhetoric, Dom show, a lot of 1210, became, why are we going to forgive these idiots for taking out these stupid loans? They should have to suffer from their past mistakes. And my point on the Dom show is you have the left here who's essentially buying off voters by paying off their student loans. And then you have the right who's not only not supporting that, which they shouldn't be, I agree with. There's no way we should forgive these student loans, and I'll get into that in a second. They're not only doing that, but they're alienating them by calling them names and being essentially D-bags to them and saying, like, we don't want you here. You made mistakes. You're idiots. We don't want you in the party. Get out of here. Republicans really need to make an effort to embrace that student loans are indeed an issue bogging down an entire generation. It's really hampered a lot of people from entering into adult life. And there are a lot of voters that see that. And in doing so, they should recognize student loans as an issue, find some kind of way to approach the issue and divert it against the universities and somehow bring up some issue, like some plan for the universities to pay it back, or I don't know. But hold the universities accountable and attack it from that way and say, hey, look, there is a real issue here. Moving forward, we should fix this. maybe those that got screwed in the past, it sucks that you got screwed. Maybe we can stop the interest payments on it. Well, we'll cut the interest, but you still got to pay back what the money you took out. But going forward, let's lay into these universities, get these tuitions into manageable, decent, a certain percentage of the eventual salary that like for example, say we have a major of a person that wants to become a foot doctor. You look at the average salary of the foot doctor in the United States, you can only charge a certain percent for the tuition to become a foot doctor at these schools. Let's find a way as Republicans to say, hey, look, we got an issue here. Let's address it. You guys might be idiots, but let's not make any idiots happen from here on out. And, this whole student loan debate is going to kill them, I think, because you have a lot of people here who actually think there's a realistic possibility that they could have $40,000 extra in their pocket.
Yeah. And I mean, in my own opinion, you should not be allowed to sign any of those student loan documents when you're the age of 18. I feel like it should be, at the very least, that should be like, we make people wait to drink at 21. I think we should make people wait for those loans and for people to think about things. And, it's people pay to they sign their life away to go drink with their friends and get out of their parents' house. And I get it. 18-year-olds should be more aware and less impulsive and act with more integrity. But let's be real here. They don't. And they're 18. Like, what did you do when you were 18? So it's definitely an interesting point, the way that you bring that up, because that is the way that the Republicans can win people over, instead of saying, hey, let's maintain this unrealistic system that continues to move on. And if anything, continues to get more and more expensive. But I will say it's hard for them to totally do that because the government backs these places and continues to just support them and give them whatever money they pretty much ask for students, as long as they could charge X amount of interest for the next 40 years, whether it's to the university or students. And they just don't. I mean, that's the problem with healthcare as well. Anytime the government's involved, if it's not an open market system, this is what happens. So
it's up, keeps going up, man. Yeah. So, and do you want to keep going? We got a couple more topics. I want to tell you about this Jussie Smollett story. Did you hear about what's going on here?
I don't think so. No.
So this girl, Carly, what's her name? Carly Russell, has taken over like all of social media. She's being called the new Jussie Smollett.
Oh, is that the plane woman?
No. So this is a story. She's down in Hoover, Alabama, right?
Okay.
And she's a 25-year-old. Thursday night, she calls 911 saying she saw a toddler with a diaper on the side of the road. And then calls family and then disappears. Everyone goes searching for her, goes missing, then turns up 49 hours later without shoes. And it kicks off like a huge internet mystery. A police chief came out today and said, due to the public fear that this case is generated, we owe it to the public to share what we have learned. She said on Thursday night, it shows Russell concealing a bathrobe and toilet paper when leaving work Thursday night. She then orders food from Tzatziki's, buys granola bars and cheese crackers at Target, then speaks to people known to her on a phone, drives a bit before she calls 911 from the interstate, saying that she saw a child. Continues following the child allegedly for 600 yards, a toddler on the side of the highway, while on the phone with 911. The police chief says 6 football fields. To think a toddler can travel 6 football fields without getting in the road, without crying, it's very hard to understand. Back at her car, they found a wig, cell phone, purse, near a vehicle, snacks from Target, items she took from the workplace. When she turned up Saturday, her family said she's not in a state to talk. 2 days, tips poured in that Russell's nowhere to be found. She returned to home on foot Saturday, and that's when her family starts saying, she can't come out and talk to media. Russell tells detectives that when she got out of the vehicle to check on her child, man came from the woods, forced her into a car, and then she woke up in the trailer of a semi-truck. She was taken by a white man with orange hair with a bald spot, a woman, and heard a child crying. Russell said she was forced to undress. Then she believes she took pictures with a couple. Then the woman played her hair, fed her cheese crackers. Then she was eventually to escape, ran through some woods, and then found her way, walked back home. Detectives, after hearing that initially, didn't press her for more. But an investigation went into it. And this became like a whole thing. There was some, racial undertones to it online. After the investigation, they found the Durzis, just before her disappearance, was searching on Google things like, quote, do you have to pay for an Amber Alert? Quote, how to take money from a register without being caught. Quote, Birmingham bus station. Quote, Taken, being the movie about abduction. And quote, maximum age for an Amber Alert.
So they're looking up Liam Neeson and how Liam Neeson dealt with it before this.
Their chief concludes saying, I think it's highly unusual for a day that someone gets kidnapped. Several before that, they're Googling the movie Liam Neeson's Taken about an abduction. So this goes viral, goes all over the place, and then it comes out today and trending on Twitter, if you look at it, is Carly Smollett, kind of comparisons. I mean, the police chief came out and said this. What are your assumptions on this story? Do you think the girl was abducted? Do you think she's reenacting this film? Do you think it was just a coincidence that she Googled that stuff beforehand? Like, how do you think this mystery ends?
That almost sounds like a hostage situation, kind of. Even though I understand the Google stuff is weird and all that kind of stuff is weird, but that sounds like a situation where maybe there's blackmail and they're being forced to do something. Because why would someone do that voluntarily unless they have some sort of mental disability? That's just my initial reaction with that story. Like nothing, it doesn't seem like anything necessarily, I don't know, it could have race implications. Who knows with the people in this trailer? God knows what's going on. I mean, the details are still coming out. So I don't know. To me, that really seems like almost a blackmail situation where someone's being forced to do something.
All right, I got to be really careful with this question. In a world where victimhood is virtue, do you think there is a society in our future where people make up stories such as this to give themselves social credit through victimhood of having to go through something like? Do you know what I'm saying here? So, because with social media, with the internet, when you're a victim in today's world, sometimes you can become a hero, you can become an icon. Do you think people will try to strive through fame by creating stories to get there?
I do think the victimhood culture creates this kind of need for you to say, it honestly is similar to what you were just saying with the student loans. Like, I'm such a victim that you need to pay off all my student loans. It's the same thing with this. Oh, I'm such a victim. Everyone look at this story. And now I'm going to go viral and become a celebrity from it. And God knows, to me, this almost seems like someone who has a mental issue here. And this is, I don't know, like you said, I want to be careful because it seems like a very serious situation. But to your point, I think it is cooler to be the victim and say I'm the victim and ask for something because you're the victim, because people are kind of getting used to that and refusing to necessarily put in work because they think they just deserve something because they were slighted in some way. When in reality, if we all thought like that, if we all were saying, oh, well, I was slighted like this, so I can't move forward, the world would just stop because we all are slighted at times. And I'm not trying to say, you or I are different. There's obviously levels to these situations, but you can't get that hung up on things and you have to move forward in life. Like if you constantly look backward and are so critical, we're all going to just constantly point fingers and yell at each other.
Yeah. Speaking of yelling at each other, it's kind of starting on the internet, liberals versus conservatives again over the first half of Barbenheimer, the double feature, Barbie, Oppenheimer, Barbie causing a lot of controversy. Christian Toto on Twitter posting, watching a review copy, 10 times mention of the word, quote, patriarchy. Reading a lot of reviews. I haven't seen the film. It comes out on Friday. It's essentially, 50s America where men had a lot of power. Women didn't have any power. We're kind of treated as second-class citizens. And flips that on its head, talking about social commentary on patriarchy, saying, the Barbies, all the women are in charge and the men are second-class citizens and really only there to, appease the Barbies and support them. And a lot of liberals are calling this movie, genius because of its underwritings on commercialism and patriarchy, and the lessons it can teach children as to. It's a movie about Barbie.
I know. Can it just be a Barbie movie? Can it just?
Right?
I haven't.
We had Barbies on horses when we were kids. Like that was.
I have totally ignored the politicization of Barbie because then I get it. The China, there was a China map in there too that people have been talking about. In my opinion, I really think they're just making Barbie because one, Barbie isn't as big now. If anything, this is another nostalgia thing for kids our age, like especially girls, to go out and be like, oh my God, when I had a Barbie, remember we played and whatever, they'll go look at their Barbie and be like, oh, we have to go see the movie. And that's, I honestly, and I get it. Are there probably some political undertones? Sure. Any creator that has any piece of art ever, whether it's Star Wars, Game of Thrones, there can be, if you interpret it the way that the writer wanted to, at times there are political themes. So I get it. But at the same time, this is a goddamn Barbie movie. And can we why do we have so conservatives always complain about how everything's always political. This is a situation to me where I feel like, if anything, they're probably making it at the very least as political as the left is with this. And that's
no, I disagree. Like I think like if you want to write a quality, groundbreaking movie about the patriarchy, why do you have to tell it through the vein of Barbie? I'm with the conservatives, man. Like why can't we just set aside Barbie, the commercial film for children, like Super Mario Brothers, and make a film that's appealing to children that doesn't have these political undertones? Like, I'm sorry, I agree that conservatives are only adding fuel to the fire, but I'm sorry, they didn't start it.
I just think we look for every little thing to see it as political as possible. I'm not saying that there aren't necessarily political messages in it. There are, but I just think anytime there's even a hint of that, we all hop on it, whether it's the Democrats or the conservatives, and they're just losing their minds. And they, it's like a dog that finds a jar of trash or dumpster and starts eating all the trash. And that's what it is. We all lose our minds over it. But I'm definitely way more excited for Oppenheimer than Barbie. Either way.
Are you going to Barbenheimer? They're actually they're actually calling it Barbenheimer.
Yes.
So many people are buying double feature tickets.
There's so many memes of like guys dressed up in total tuxes going to see Barbie, and then they go to see Oppenheimer and they put on like a t-shirt. It's great.
Yeah, is this going to be the best film? Like, who was it? There was the writer of Taxi Driver. Wow, I feel horrible. I know the guy's name, can't think of it. Paul Schrader came out and said that Oppenheimer is by far the best movie of the century. It's only been 23 years in this century. I don't know if he meant for the past century, which would pretty much include the history of film. But if we're talking the past 23 years, that's even big. Some great films past 23 years. You think it's going to live up to the hype? You think Paul Schrader's right?
Yeah, I do. Only people who have seen it so far are pretty harsh critics, and especially with a guy like Nolan, the critics, they have expectations. And all of the reviews at this point, I think it's at a 97 right now on Rotten Tomatoes. And that is the highest score of any of his movies. And honestly, all of his movies have pretty high scores. But I really do think this will be the movie of the decade. One, because people are desperate to get back in the theaters post-COVID. He was trying to do that with Tenet, but Tenet came out like during COVID and barely made it into theaters with theaters reopening. But this, he spent so much time on it. They really used no CGI, no AI. They recreated this bomb. Obviously, he didn't launch a nuke, but they recreated it with pyro.
Didn't?
No. But obviously, it's a real explosion, a Hollywood grade, and they spent a ton of time and effort into making this as legitimate and as real as possible. And I think this movie alone, especially with all the strikes lately, this movie alone really shows and encapsulates. I didn't see it yet, but this shows why you need human emotion, human writers, human directors, and people who are this passionate about film. Because if you don't, I think we're going to see AI have more and more of a role, and it's going to be more of kind of the same of this over regurgitated movie reboot, kind of superhero obsessed, maybe even sometimes politics driven Hollywood that we continue to complain about. So then something like this can, I think, finally, opposing to the Barbie point, I think a movie like this can bring people back together and realize, you know, this is why we see movies. It brings people together. It tells a story, and it's
So that's the point of the double feature. You know, you go this way when you watch Barbie, then you come together. You know, it's all to tie it together. I don't know where that SAG-AFTRA strike lands, but I've been paying somewhat close attention to that because last time these writers went on strike, to your point, they weren't AI writers; they were just crappy writers. But Friday Night Lights season 2, man, absolute garbage. The coach leaves the school, goes off to another school. It's like a whole completely different TV show. And when the writers come back, you can tell it's like season 1 all over again. So pay close attention to these writers, man, because you want them if you like TV. I'll tell you that.
I mean, I will say this. I think AI, we all look at it almost too negatively at times. Like, it is a scary thing. But at the same time, it's going to take a lot of monotony out of a lot of things, including, I think, in the entertainment industry. And if we embrace it in the right way, but still leave the most important human elements in there, I think it can be a benefit. But that's why we have to be careful, even though, you know, we haven't been careful till now, or we haven't at all.
For your, like, just thinking for the profession of writing, I could see it being beneficial that a writer writes all his things, like he writes the entire script, but leaves a block. Like, say you have 2 characters having a casual conversation in the background at the water cooler. Even though they're the secondary conversation, it's happening in the background. A writer's got to write the conversation that they're having. So maybe the writer writes the primary conversation on screen, and the background conversation of the 2 workers over at the water cooler is written by AI, just because, you know, it doesn't really matter to the story. I could see it being real beneficial in that sense. So yeah, if you can, you know, work with it, it can make the jobs easier for the writers. But it's very important to, you know, not encourage it too much, I guess, right?
I mean, that's why. Yeah, I'm just worried, even though I fully support the writer's strike. And I mean, I just think you got to be, it's a fine line, because these studios, I think we've seen, especially with like Disney and I mean, on most of these companies, they're very willing to use AI and kind of move forward and cut costs, especially since COVID. So I'm just worried that this will take out a lot of jobs that may take a while to replace until the economy starts turning around a little bit.
Can't wait for a world where just AI writes everything we, you know,
yeah.
Like, we're passionate about TV shows and they're soon going to be written by AI. Like, we're passionate about crap that AI is writing. It's a weird world. Let's do some streaming suggestions before we get out of here. We really got to get back into sports sometime when we don't spend so much time on the current events. But Warrior on HBO, 3rd season now. I checked it out based on Cohen's suggestion. You know, Cohen from Crofton's. He said, go watch the first 4 minutes of Warrior on HBO. It's the best opening sequence he's ever seen. I watched it. It's awesome, man. It's a kung fu show. It was written by Bruce Lee and kind of ditched. I think no studios wanted to pick it up because of maybe racial implications at the time or whatever. He wrote like an entire script. Became somewhat of like forgotten media, and then the showrunners of Banshee on Showtime picked it up and started writing an entire show based on the Bruce Lee script. And it's the story of a guy who's well trained in martial arts, and he heads into 1870s San Francisco as the Chinese immigration population starts exploding and Chinatown's invented, or really building. And it's the story of 2 factions of Chinese gangs going at each other while dealing with a overarching threat of, you know, a racial environment, an Irish neighborhood, police officers who really don't care about them as humans. So there's definitely political undertones to it, but I think it's done in a way that's not like it feels real. The Wire, I think, is a good example of that, where you see it playing out in front of you and you can think to yourself, yeah, this is how it all went down. And it's like, yeah, it gives you pause and thinking, but you're not thinking to yourself, damn, I feel like this is being shoved down my throat, forced down my throat. That's really how you feel with Warrior so far as well, that there's not like some lessons that they're trying to teach you. It's a really, really, really good show. I highly suggest Warrior on HBO. You see that one?
I have not. I have heard a lot of good things. I do need to get into that. This is the issue. We talk about so many shows. It's like by the end of the night, I can only watch one of them. So I need to get caught up a little bit one of these weekends. But I will say, to that point,
hold on, I'm gonna cut you off real quick. Let's do. Hi, Dom. You're on the other side right now. First ever appearance. How you doing, sir?
Very well, as I'm under protest.
Oh, come on. You're allowed. I arranged it. I answered the phone. You were calling me.
That's not true. I think there's all kinds of violations here.
Dom, we're wrapping up right now. Going to be about 5 more minutes, and I'll give you a ring back, and we'll talk about tomorrow's show. Okay?
That sounds good. That's where I get.
Talk to you in a sec, though.
Oh my God.
I'm sorry about that. Continue there.
That guy.
I love him. He's
I've heard a
awesome.
ton of stuff. I've heard a ton of stuff about Warrior. I do need to get on top of it. I finally have wrapped up The Bear, which was as good as the first season, if not better. And
So good.
I'm just elated that I finally had the time to do it. But also a movie I checked out over the weekend, which I don't normally do this, but because we work around politics. But I watched a movie from 2011, The Ides of March, with George Clooney, Ryan Gosling, Paul Giamatti, Philip Seymour Hoffman, and it's about a Pennsylvania governor, actually Democrat, who is stumping in Ohio for the Ohio primary when it comes to the Democratic primary. And Ryan Gosling is kind of the new guy on the block, but rising star. Philip Seymour Hoffman is kind of the head of that campaign there, and George Clooney plays
Great
the
actor.
And I mean, it is everything you'd want out of a political drama and more. And it shows
This cast is amazing. Like Ryan Gosling, George Clooney, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Paul Giamatti. I love Giamatti. Evan Rachel Wood from Westworld, Marissa Tomei, Jeffrey Wright from Westworld. Like some really good actors in here, man.
And that's exactly why it caught my eye. And the drama really, I mean, it does a great job at depicting the dirty background of politics and really kind of what happens and the talks and the journalists getting involved and, you know, the people in the office and who knows and who's not in the know. And I mean, I don't want to give away too much, but just Ryan Gosling as he continues to move forward and really peel back the onion a little bit, even though when you meet him in the movie, he's been around politics. This clearly is the furthest he's gotten. And, you know, it kind of unfolds how messy it can be once you get closer and closer to the top.
I'm going to check that one out. Sounds very, very interesting.
It's on Hulu, but you could get it on plenty of things.
Tomatoes. Yeah, I'll be checking that one out. Was that a Hulu original or was it like a theater film?
No, that was a theater. Yeah, they just have the rights right now.
Gotcha. All right, brother. Final thoughts. Kyle Schwarber gets a huge catch. Obviously,
Finally.
an ace fielder. Everyone, they talk about this guy as a horrible fielder. I'm over here telling you, watch it. You know, you get hit it to the wall in left field. Schwarber's going to jump 5 feet and catch it. I've been saying it all along. Great fielder. Kyle Schwarber, top 3 fielder in the MLB. Catch me. Kyle Schwarber is not a great fielder. No. But what do you want to do with the outfield? You want to hang on to Schwarber? I mean, Dom's full force on the Ohtani train, I feel, at this point.
Well, okay, yeah, sure. But we all want Ohtani, but Painter just got hurt, so I just very doubtful on that. Ohtani is just an absolute beast. Wherever he ends up, it's going to be a package, no matter what.
All right, so I got to call Dom back. I feel bad, so let's hurry through this real quick. Phillies, you got Ohtani, who's going to come out in free agency, or you can rent him, and you're going to give up Painter, probably Stott, probably other prospects.
A lot.
Do you actually go for the rental of Ohtani in hopes that you re-sign him, or you just wait for free agency?
I'd wait. I mean, obviously, a lot of these guys want to be able to extend him with the trade package, but I don't know. I just think the Phillies are in a good place right now. If you're really going to give up your best prospect and obviously players from the current roster, it's hard. It's tough. And I get it. He's a generational guy, so you just want to say do it. But at the same time, I just think, if anything, the Phillies probably don't even have the best package to offer. There's probably going to be a team that gives them pretty much their entire farm system for this guy. So I just don't see it happening with him.
Is Ruben Amaro running a team right now? If so, they should be calling Ruben. Ruben would give the entire farm.
Yeah. I mean, he'll be talking.
I know he's on TV still, isn't he? Yeah, he's doing the games.
Yeah, he's on occasionally. But to your point about Schwarber, I'm cool with keeping him in the field, even though my buddies and I, we sit in left field a lot at a lot of the games. And one of my things has been just ripping into Schwarber because he can't catch. And I get it. You know, he's a good hitter, but it's Philly. Come on, I'm going to bitch at you if the kid can catch the ball better than you, that you throw.
Wait, so are you actually like yelling at him, like, Schwarber, you got to make that catch?
You're like, come on, dude, whatever. I'm like, this 8th grader just caught this. You can't. Your drink at Wawa's too sweet, dude. Come on, let's get it together.
The Schwarbomb. You see they have the Schwarbomb in Florida and Maryland also? Yeah. It's all over the country, man. You can get a Schwarbomb down in Florida. I had no idea. And then final thing, Joe Gilly over on WIP. I love the guy, but he has some really out there takes. Last year he was trying to say we should trade Bryce Harper for Juan Soto. This year he spent the past 2 weeks now, I feel like, calling for a trade for Turner for Juan Soto. Wait, is it Juan Soto? Is that who's asking for the trade?
Soto, yeah.
Okay, I didn't know if it was Soto or who else is out there? Goldschmidt? All right, yeah, Soto, whatever. So he's calling for this trade for Soto. One, trade Turner for Soto. Would you do that?
Yeah,
I think so. Do you think Soto, though, like my problem with trading Trey Turner for Soto, and what I would say to Giglio if I called in, him and Bryce Harper are best friends, and you got a guy locked up for how many years in Bryce Harper that you're very much taking the chance of pissing off by trading away his best friend for a player who's going to come in, who's, if we're honest with ourselves, younger and better than Bryce Harper, so comes in with the ego of being the best player in the clubhouse. And you're saying to this guy, hey, I'm going to trade your best friend for a guy who's known as a locker room issue, who has quite the ego. We're going to pretty much hitch our trailers to that wagon instead. I think that might cause some issues in the locker room.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. I mean, I was out there booing them. People were screaming steroids last week when I was at the Padres game and all this stuff at him. So, yeah, I get it. And to your point, if Trey's close with Bryce, but I do think Bryce is such a smart baseball guy. If that is what's best for the team, he'd be open to it. I just think Bryce, to your point about like whether he's a distraction, I think that's something that Bryce, he doesn't tolerate necessarily. So I think he could be conflicted on it, but would it help the team right now? I kind of think it would, just because Trey really, and I get it, it's not been the longest litmus test, but he really hasn't been the bag of goods we were sold.
You also triggered something to me because Bryce, you got to keep in mind, he had the reputation of Soto when he was Soto's age. Mm-hmm. He was known as that guy with too big of an ego that pissed off the older players. So maybe Bryce and the lessons he learned might be incredibly valuable to share with a younger player and teach him the same lessons and turn around the reputation of Soto. I mean, Soto's known as a great player. Just the off-field issues have become an issue for San Diego. But Anthony, let's get out of here. I got to give Dom a ring back. I told him 5 minutes. I feel terrible. Guys, I hope he's not waiting for me. Dom, I am so sorry. But giving you a ring now. But Anthony, why don't you take us out of here? I'll see you guys tomorrow at noon on the Dom Giordano program.
Yes, thank you guys for watching and listening. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and as always on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching. You can find Dan on the Dom Show. I'll be with Kale and Dawn. Until next week, thank you so much for watching. See you next week.
Peace.